Welcome to our session. Cheryl and I are really pleased to be here with you and to try to broaden our idea of what it takes to do a purposeful practice. To do that, let me just get to the right thing. Our agenda is why focus on sound to syntax? Why are we framing practice in that way? What is a multi-component approach, and how does that relate to sound to syntax? What is the word knowledge network? And I'll tell you now that it is a graphic representation of the multi-component approach, and we want to talk about why this framework we think is important. And then how can we use a multi-component literacy model to provide purposeful practice? So with that as our agenda, let's go. A couple of years ago, an article appeared in the Reading League Journal that said what this model is about better than we could. So we've borrowed this quote to talk about the fact that neuroscience has now confirmed for us things that we maybe were doing long ago, but now know why it's so important to do, which is that we need to be covering multiple layers, multiple aspects of a word for students to become proficient readers, because we're building that reading circuit by dealing with the orthographic structure, the sound structure, the meaning, semantic, morphological, practice that links together the multiple dimensions of words is what leads us to the reorganization in our brains and the automaticity that will get us to mastery. We've tied this multi-component model to the definition of a structured literacy because we think it's a way to effectively connect this neuroscience model, if you will, to an instructional model. So structured literacy is the form of instruction for reading and writing that integrates all of these components and does that using direct, cumulative, and systematic instructional practices. So what's important here is when we talk about the science of reading and we talk about the structured literacy and what that definition is, what's really important is to realize that they go hand in glove, and we're talking about the same basic components. So the critical word here that we want to get to today is that we want to integrate these various dimensions. For those of you who are interested in IDA's definition and model for the structured literacy, the QR code on the left will take you to this graphic. And what's nice, beautiful actually about this graphic is that it's mapping out what we're teaching, which are these components, how to teach it, which gets into the instructional aspects. And certainly all of this is based on the why or the science of reading. On the right-hand side is another link for you if you're interested in having more background information about this model. But what tends to happen, and the reason we're emphasizing the word integrated, is all too often our instruction and practice tends to be silo-esque. We have a silo of working on phonology, orthography, semantics, morphology, and syntax. And what we are wanting to focus on today is that these are, in essence, not silos, but they are and should be related to each other. And we should probably have even a two-directional arrow here, because part of learning certain aspects of our language that are benefited by knowing something else. And I'll talk about that more in just a moment. In the same article I mentioned earlier, the reason this model is so critical to us is that it is the automatic recognition of these components that will bring us to being automatic and comprehending readers. So what I think is important is that we have the reverse or the impact of oral language on the decoding process. So it's important to think of these multi-components not in just a linear fashion, but in an iterative and reciprocal fashion. So let's go to the next slide, which is how Cheryl and I tried to make this model concrete, which is, we call this the word knowledge network, which lays out in order, in sequence, these components, but the graphic is intended to show the bidirectional nature of this. So if I were to say the sounds k, ast, we are in the phonology realm here, and we're at this point, we're not seeing the letters, and this would be phonemic awareness and activities where we're segmenting sounds. As soon as we assign a letter to or associate a letter to represent the sound, we see the word, then C-A-S-T, and now the student is actually decoding. One of the things that we have kept in our model is the syllable unit, because once students have orthographically mapped cast, we want them to be using that larger chunk to read longer words like castaway or recast. So that gets us through the sound to spelling. But for every word that we are decoding, getting from print to speech, we want to work on the multiple meanings of those words or the semantic aspects. So for example, cast is what we mean by cast is that hard bandage that we use when we break a bone. But it also means a group of people that might be in a movie or a play. It is also an action, like to cast the line in order to go fishing. Can even be idiomatic, which is to cast a spell. It isn't, though, until later that we know which of those meanings, and we'll get to that in a moment. Cast can also have be impacted by morphological elements. If I added ing to cast, it means I'm doing that action now. I'm casting my line to go fishing. But it isn't until we get to syntax, which is why it's an important point on this circle, is until we get to syntax, we don't know which of those meanings we are intending. And this is where the relationship between decoding and comprehension has to go through syntax, because if we aren't helping students understand the words they're decoding within those contexts, we are not going to have comprehending readers. So this model, we think, illustrates or covers both aspects of the reading rope, namely word recognition are those first three areas, and then the final three areas are the top part of the rope. If you're interested in this graphic, the next click should bring in a QR code. If you're interested in knowing more about this, that's where that QR code will take you. So I think we can move to the next slide. So practice, and one of the reasons that we're really focused on the word practice and meaningful practice is that one of the things that Vaughn and Fletcher articulated in an article in the American Educator a couple of years ago was that we may be teaching correctly according to the science, but we're still having a lot of students who are not becoming proficient. And they're placing some of that responsibility at the feet of practice. So practice leads to the automaticity tied to the brain reorganization that must occur for children to read. And that exists on a continuum. We're not going to get into that differentiation in this session, but that's what we'll be talking about later. Okay, Cheryl, let's go. So what's essential in this model, however, is something has to be driving the bus. And what's driving the bus is a scope and sequence of phonics. And that undergrids, the next click, should show that we have a scope and sequence that allows us to build from individual sound to spelling correspondences to words and to phrases, and then ultimately to text, which is why we are describing this as sound to syntax. The QR codes here share with you both on Reading Rockets, the scope and sequence that we have used, which is based on moving from the most frequent to less frequent elements of our phonics system, as well as a scope and sequence that parallels or rolls out these other dimensions, namely semantics and morphology and syntax. So our idea here is that all activities are based on the scope and sequence, which then covers this series of activities that we should be doing to move our students, not just to be able to decode the words, but to move from sound to syntax. So often what we have observed and what led to our focus is we work on the words often in isolation, which is what you're seeing on the left side. And then we're very, I think, in growing, and this is a wonderful thing, growing interest and use of decodable text. But in between those two activities, reading words in isolation, which may or may not have meaning because we don't know how those multiple meanings are being played out, and the text, we have activities that do a variety of things which move us from individual sounds down to a syntactic level. So with that as a backdrop, we'd like to shift now to the actual examples of activities to illustrate how this practice might be carried out. Before we move on, however, are there any questions? I know there have been some distracting moments there, but are there any questions that we should stop and answer?
So thank you so much. I do not see any questions from participants in the chat right now. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll be glad to focus those questions to the presenters.
Okay.
Everybody is currently muted, but if you have any questions, if you could please put them in the chat.
Great. So I want to take you into level A of Sortegories and just look at this row by row, because what this matrix is going to illustrate is our grid that does go from sound to syntax that Nancy's been talking about. So if you look at the first row, we're talking about decoding and encoding, right? Reading and spelling. The first activity is sound match. So you go from sounds to letters and then back from letters to sounds, because we need to be teaching those together. Map it and build it, we'll show you an example of, but map it is phoneme graphing mapping and build it is chaining words. We go from that using this phonology of row 1 to the same phonology, and we say, okay, now what do those words mean? So related is synonyms and antonyms, categories is higher level thinking, and how do we put those words into categories? And then analogy building really is pulling the first two activities, those skills together to apply to a more advanced skill, which is analogies. The last row here, vocabulary and context, builds with morphology, grammar and syntax, and phrase building. The important thing to note here is that we have blocked practice in the first row, going from the easiest of skills, building on it and building on it. So this builds from left to right in a blocked way. So just learning that skill to mastery or near mastery level before we apply it and interleave it with vocabulary. So can you take those sounds and letters, read the words, and apply meaning to them? That's interleaving, and that helps us get to mastery quicker as well. What's really important, though, is that we teach a generalization. Can we take the sounds and letters? Can we deal with the meanings of the words once we've built those words? And then can we use them in some type of higher level context? And that is how we get to mastery. In level B, we change things up a bit. In sound match, we'll show you an example of that, but it grows up to more advanced sounds, medial vowels and such. We build by syllables. As Nancy said, we have to attend to those longer words that our students have trouble with. Phrase building turns to sentence fluency, and eventually in level C, it gets to sentence meaning. Again, moving from sound to syntax, the easier skills builds on the more difficult skills, and then from top to bottom, also from skills to comprehension. And again, addressing both upper and lower rope of the reading rope. So let's look at some examples of decoding and encoding. This is Map It. I'll go ahead and play this and see what you notice based on what you've heard so far.
Sortegories. Level A. Map It.
Map It focuses on the segmentation, deletion, and substitution of sounds in words. In the first task of Map It, identify or segment each sound in a word. In the second task, remove or delete a sound to change a word. In the third task, change or manipulate a sound to create a new word. Click here to see how the heart lets you know the part that is tricky. Before you try it, click here to see an example.
Try it. These are on our website.
His.
These try-its are on our website at sortegories.com if anybody wants to check those out. But basically what we're going to ask is the students to say the sounds right? And then hit submit.
His. Is.
Adding letters right away.
The word is flag.
If I don't understand, I'm maybe just learning my blends and I don't have that quite right, I get another chance
Try again.
to try again.
The word is flag. Not quite. Flag has 4 sounds.
And here's the
spelled with
corrective
4
feedback.
letters. L, A, G. Flag. The word is was.
So this is a word that I remember my teacher talking about, but I'm not quite
Try
sure
again.
how I spell that.
The
So
word is
I can go to the heart words. I can find was in my little mini dictionary. There's a larger dictionary.
the
whole
letter
program.
A spells in was.
Sound I missed. So then I can go back. I can hit the
The word
speaker.
is was.
And have the kids say it at the same time.
Was. Was.
There's also, you can have kids using whiteboards
The
and writing
word
down
is
those letters.
Print.
My granddaughter particularly likes it when all the boxes are used. She thinks that's a big celebration.
Print.
Typically, there's 10 dots down
Print.
here. This is just a quick demo.
The word is hands.
So we're going to change the task. You'll see at the top, we're going to delete a sound. First, I have to know what the sounds are.
Hands. Change hands to hand.
So you might want to do this with me at home. You can put your fingers up. Which sound would you delete? You can do that in your classroom too. You can ask them what sound to delete if you're doing this whole group.
Hands without the z is hand. Change hand to and.
So you can do the same thing at home. Which sound would you delete? Ask your students to show their fingers.
Hand without the is and. Change and to an.
If I make a mistake, it will give me
Oops.
another
Click
chance.
try again. Change and to an. And without the d is an.
Always bringing in letters for feedback.
Change dig to big.
So this word is dig. I need to change it to big. So I have to say, I wonder what sound I would change. What are the sounds in dig? What change? So this is the sound I need to change.
That's right. Change d in dig to b big.
And then the letters come in for feedback.
Change big to bag.
Some of you might be saying, oh, this is what I do with tiles on a countertop, on a table, on my work table. Absolutely. Do this with tiles, sticky
That's
notes.
right. Change I in big to a, bag. Change bag to bat.
Change bag to bat. So what are you doing? What sound would you change? You can tell in the chat or using your fingers.
You got it. Change g in bag to t, bat.
So what you're doing here is really
Change
word building.
bat to vat.
You're doing word building with manipulatives and colors and then adding letters.
Nice job. Change b in bat to v, vat.
Great. This is where I have trouble sometimes. Okay. From there, from that map it, segmentation, phonemic awareness, adding the letters, we go to build it, which is all letters.
Build sat. Change sat to fat. Change fat to cat.
That's just a quick demonstration of that. So in level B, we're going to the syllable level. So a couple things are happening. We're looking at medial vowels in sound match and building at the syllable level. Let's look at those medial vowels. Not just medial vowels, but that's just one example of how things get more difficult. I'm going to skip this part just to come through a little quicker. We can skip that by clicking.
In sound match, the focus is on sound to spelling associations. In the first match, the focus is on where the sound is the same in two spoken words. The second match is between the spoken sound and a letter or letters that are used to spell the sound. Before you try it, click here to see an example. When you are ready, click Try It. Home, cope. Where is the sound the same in home and cope?
So in this case, we're going to do what we did in sound match before. We need the sounds for home. Oh, and oh. But I might not really be sure
Select
what that
pile
O
for
sound
help.
is. So if I need a little help on long O, I can select the
Sometimes
O.
the letter O spells its letter name O. For example, hop, hope. A final silent E tells the vowel to say its name. A consonant comes between the vowel and silent E. Hope.
Then I might have a better chance of getting that right if that long O was difficult for me.
O is the same In home and cope, the letter O with a final silent E spells O.
There's different examples of that. Also in level B, we start building words at the syllable level. As we know, kids have trouble building and reading longer words. I hit skip to get through this a little quicker.
In level B, Build It uses syllables to chain and blend longer words. In part 1 of Build It, build a series of words by changing one syllable. In part 2, listen and repeat a sequence of syllables. Blend the syllables and select the word. Before you try it, click here to see an example, or click here for help with syllables and vowel sounds. Build, inhale.
So my word is inhale, so I have to know that inhale. Get that?
Inhale, inhale.
See the two parts coming together to make a whole word.
Change inhale to exhale.
So now what part of the word do I need to change? I need to change this part of the word. Here I do have some help options.
Select an option. Vowel sounds. What is a syllable? Syllable meanings. Longer words.
So I won't get into these now, but there's help for anything, any type of decoding, advanced decoding skills that students could need help with, including syllable meanings, which is morphology, and reading those longer words more on syllable types.
Change inhale to exhale.
So I can change the word again and continue.
Exhale, exhale.
Cheryl, may I just add, while showing those examples of the help, two things that we're trying to illustrate that Sortegories does, but I think is important instructionally, is one is immediate feedback within the activity the student is doing, but also the help may actually be as helpful sometimes to the teachers to know, have that content at their fingertips to be able to help the teacher at the point of instruction. So this point of use is not limited, or point of immediate feedback isn't just limited to errors that kids make, but also to that instructional tie-in. So go ahead.
That's a really good point. Sortegories is educative for students and teachers. And it is really helpful to have some of that language in this help situation and that question mark. So now we go into the next row and we have categorize it. So categorize it, in this case, we're taking all of the words and we're sorting them according to categories. And then we're going into the dictionary to see what some of those words mean. Let's have a look at the dictionary. Oh, no, that's not the dictionary, sorry.
First, an important question. Dogs or cats?
Okay, I'm gonna pick dogs. You guys can pick when it's your turn.
First, select the audio icons to listen to each category. Animals, names, and neither. Then, drag the words that appear here to the correct category. At any time, you may move words from one category to another. When no more words appear, click Submit to check your answer. You can use this icon at the top to view an example, or use the glossary icon to see pictures and meanings for the words in this activity. For example, drag the first word to the correct category and drop it. Now do the same for the second word. At any time, you can move words from one category to another. Repeat until no more words appear. Click Submit to check your answer. Words in the correct category will appear in blue. Words in red are not in the correct category. Don't worry, you'll have a second try to get as many words correct as you can. Now it's your turn. Put each word in the correct category.
So the category names are not decodable, so you can hear them.
Animals.
So they're read to you. We can sort these words. We would say the word and sort at the same time because all of these words are decodable. So we would say bat, students would come up and do this at the smartboard with you. They could do it on whiteboards, or they could do it on paper, just add paper if that's something that's helpful. So I think, I don't know what a cast is. Cam is a name, a Matt. Maybe that's me there. Sam is a name. Abs? Abs? I don't know, abs. Tam? Oh, that could be a name. Cat. Oh, I have a cat. Cab. I think a cab. I think I wrote in a cab. Matt. There's a boy in my class that's named Matt. So I can hit submit.
Good try.
Oh.
Words in blue are in the right category.
Darn.
Try again with the words in red.
So why am I confused about cast? So let's look at that.
Select a word to see and hear the definition.
So I can find the word cast.
Cast. A stiff bandage for a broken bone.
Oh, I saw my friend had a cast on. So it's not, of course, it's no one's name. That was silly. It's neither. And then I can try again.
Great job. All 10 words are correct.
So in this
Wonderful.
case,
you earned a ribbon.
The kids will earn a ribbon, which they love. It's a dog ribbon because they chose dog.
Click a pet to feed it.
And then they get
when you are done, click continue.
So then they get to feed pets, which we donate to rescue animals. I can feed one at a time. I can teach left to right, top to bottom. I can also feed all the pets.
Here are your results.
Here's the printout to let, you can have, the students can send them to you. They can print them or just have a little party in their chair for a moment that they got them all right in this case.
Thank you. For every 10,000 points scored on Sortegories, we will make a donation to feed rescue animals. The more points you earn, the more we can help together.
Click replay.
The students are really enjoying the fact that they can be part of a bigger societal solution in feeding those rescue animals. That's really been resonating with a lot of our students. So that is vocabulary. That is in row 2. That is talking about word meaning. We also have vocabulary. We have analogy building, which is higher level thinking. And if you're looking to challenge some kids.
Cut is to bandage, as break is to.
It's a great place to challenge kids.
Oops. Click try again. Cut is to bandage, as break is to. A cut is covered by a bandage. Correct. Cut is to bandage, as break is to cast.
And
So the feet, go ahead.
I was just going to make the point that this activity also forces some knowledge of the multiple meaning and which one is going to work in this particular analogy. So, excuse me, Cheryl, go ahead.
So the next row is vocabulary and context. And here we're building phrases and then asking for what does that phrase mean? And eventually we get to the sentence level in B and we get to sentence meaning.
Build the fat cat.
So they're building it and then they have to say, well, what does it mean?
What question does this phrase answer in the following sentence? The fat cat climbed slowly up the tree.
So that's building in your syntax at a very early stage. You know, many of us think we can't teach syntax at that age, but we surely can. Very early, we can start teaching syntax. Next, we move into vocabulary and constant. Phrase building moves to sentence fluency. So we're looking at sentences and then looking for how do we find the topic.
In sentence fluency, students focus on 2 skills. First, students identify the meaning of a part of a sentence. Next, They identify the topic of decodable nonfiction text. These skills contribute to reading fluency and comprehension. A visual explanation available here helps students understand the meaning of a phrase. Click here for help reading longer words. Before you try it, click here to see an example. When you are ready, click Try It. What word or phrase answers did what?
So in this case, the students can read the decodable text, but we're asking them not only to read it, we're asking them to do something with it. So did what? In my 9th grade class, I had non-readers, 9th graders. We would have to read the whole thing. Animals, other than birds, make nests as their homes. And that's how I would teach them to read it, a scoop at a time. I would have to go back to who did it, animals, then did what, and eventually they could just pick out the did what, but not at first. They had to do the who did it, did what.
Oops, click Try Again.
So this is what they would do. They would pick the next thing after animals, right? And they say, because they were not comprehending what they were reading, they were just at the decoding part. So what did they do?
What word or phrase answers did what?
So I could be confused about did what. I can come here
Select
into
an option. What is schwa?
oops,
What
wrong
is a
place.
syllable?
The other
What
one, there you
word?
go.
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. Okay.
Select a question.
So then I can hit did what to get more information on did what.
Did what? Did what tells us the action the thing or object did. The dog ran. Did what? It ran.
So right at point of use, teachers and students have a place to come
What
to remedy
word
the
or phrase
situation.
answers did what?
So based on that, in a classroom, I would go back to who did it, animals did what, and based on that explanation, hopefully we would have enough information to get that right.
What word or phrase answers where?
So where we would click this again and just, I would have to continue to tell them they need a place. Which of those phrases is a place after reading all of this by one phrase at a time?
What word or phrase answers what did it?
So on this one, what did it? We would read the whole thing again. Some reptiles make nests next to the water so their eggs are safe until they hatch. I would teach them to read in those meaningful phrases. What did it? Some reptiles.
Read the sentences. Then click on a tile that tells who or what the 3 sentences are about.
So you'll notice the sentences, you've already seen them. The phrase indicators are removed, so students hopefully can still read them. Animals, other than birds, make nests as their homes. That's how we practiced it. In addition to that, we have to answer the question.
Read the sentences. Then click on a tile that tells who or what the 3 sentences are about.
So I have to decide, is it about animal nests, mammal nests, or reptile nests? Well, I think it's about mammal nests. Oops.
Click Try Again.
I got it wrong.
Read the sentences.
But I really
Then
think I'm right.
click on a tile that tells who or what the 3 sentences are about. Not quite.
In this case,
these sentences are about animal nests.
And everything is chosen and help the student know why it's animal nests and not mammal nests, okay? In level C, we move to syntax sense. And it's just bumping up what they already did. Let's play this for you.
Syntax sense focuses on the grammatical questions answered by a word or phrase in a sentence. Attention to meaningful phrases in sentences contributes to text comprehension. A built-in help provides visual explanations for the grammatical questions. Watch how Sortegories provides explicit instructions for syntax sense. Once you learn how to do this activity, you can skip this step and revisit the example at any time. In this activity, read the sentence. Then click on the question that is answered by the underlined word or phrase. Click Submit to check your answer. Use this icon to see an example. Select this icon for help information, or use this one for help with word study. For example, what question does the phrase cactus and yucca answer? Select your answer, then click Submit. Right, cactus and yucca answers the question, what did it?
So you can see that we're moving into syntax sense. So we're making it more and more difficult. More of the work goes to the student as opposed to the lift is really owned more by the student. Keeping in mind, we have nonfiction decodable text working on syntax at the same time. That's how we're generalizing to mastery. In level C, we also have sentence meaning. So phrase building goes up to sentence fluency and then sentence meaning.
Sentence meaning focuses on text comprehension in two ways: completing a meaningful sentence and identifying the topic across informational sentences. A built-in help provides visual explanations about the function of phrases, how to determine the topic of a paragraph, and how to read longer words. Watch how Sortegories provides explicit instructions for sentence meaning. Once you learn how to do this activity, you can skip this step and revisit the example at any time. This is a two-part activity. In part 1, read the whole sentence and notice the question. Then choose the word or phrase that answers the question and makes the best sense in the sentence. Drag and drop it to complete the sentence. Select the audio icon to hear the question again. Click Submit to check your answer. Use this icon to see an example. Select this icon for help information, or use this one for help with word study. For example, what word or phrase best answers what did it? Drag your answer and drop it to complete the sentence. Then click Submit. That's correct. Cactus answers what did it and makes sense in the sentence. In part 2, read the text. Then click on the underlined words or phrases that tell the who or what this text is about. Click Submit to check your answer. For example, read the text. Then click on the underlined words or phrases that tell the who or what this text is about. Then click Submit. Right, this text is about cactus.
In that activity, what we're trying to do is bring the relevance of understanding these syntactical elements to actually comprehending text. And many kids have difficulty with informational text when we get to the end of knowing who or what it's about. So we're trying to provide a lot of very explicit practice with that skill. So. So,
Any questions?
yeah, are there any questions before we move on?
Yes, we did have one question.
Yeah.
Do all students begin at level A? Is there a diagnostic assessment to place students at a particular level?
So students can begin wherever the teacher decides based on a diagnostic assessment or comparing your scope and sequence with the Sortegories scope and sequence, which is on the Sortegories website. So the diagnostic placement, if you will, is a spelling test, which is included. It's, and then you can see where the point of the errors are. If they're having trouble with short vowels, you would start right away in level A. So the diagnostic assessments are optional because many teachers and schools have a lot of diagnostic assessments that they already have. But if you need something, it's included in Sortegories.
Thank you.
Anything else, Karen?
Nothing else as far as content is concerned. If anybody else has any additional questions, please put those in the chat.
Thank you.
So we'd like to bring what we've just been talking about back to structured literacy. And one of the things that Lindsay Kimeny covered in her Seven Mighty Moves book was the importance of a phonics lesson, so that you're ensuring that you're covering all of these different aspects of word learning and all the way to text every single lesson, or at least attempting to. And the arrows here signal some of the key places where Sortegories that Cheryl was just illustrating actually come into play. But if we go to the next slide, the activity, this thought process can be applied to decodable text without using the program Sortegories. For example, if we are talking here about, could you click one more time, Cheryl, please? If we're talking about semantics, then we might ask the question, which word is part of an animal? And this is like what we were doing with Categorize It, which we're now trying to think categorically. So we would want students to identify within that sentence, some paws are wide and some are thin, the word pause. We might also say, can you think of another part of an animal? We can also practice having students read and think about word relationships. For example, we could say which word in the sentence is an antonym or an opposite for thick, and we would want them to identify the word thin. What we're doing with these activities is driving the students back to another layer of understanding the words that they can decode. On the next slide, we can do the similar thing with morphology. There are a number of words, and dogs use their paws for lots of things. Words with the letter S added on as a morpheme unit. The question is what information is that S providing? And in this case, we would be working on getting to, it means more than one. The next activity, the next example is for syntax. And in this case, we can ask students questions very similar to what we were seeing with the Sortegories examples. For example, the first question is, what can dogs do? So we want students to identify within their decodable sentence those words that are the actions, the did what. They swim, they hunt, they run. And then what kind of dog? And dogs rather. And in this case, we want them to identify that phrase with webbed paws that tell us what kind of dog that we're talking about. And then last but not least, we could ask questions that tap into phrases that mean where on the lawn. And the reason we're advocating for this kind of a dialogue with the decodable text is to really have students process the meaning conveyed by the words. This also is a perfect type of activity to get at that strive for five exchange that we're hearing about, where going back and forth in that communication about the text is building comprehension. So all of this is designed to say that simple rules, simple patterns, and massive amount of practice is required to achieve fluent and comprehensible reading. And we hope that you'll use the Word Knowledge Network to help you achieve that.
So if we go back to earlier, Nancy mentioned the science of reading and how important it is to know the science. So we've collected a few resources that will help you feel comfortable in learning more about the science and the products that you're using. Like, look for products that have an ESSA rating. Look to patent, of course. Here we are. The Reading League Compass, IDA, Reading Universe, Iowa Research Reading Center has phenomenal resources, as does Reading Rocket. So we just wanted to point out a few of the trusted resources that we have collected ourselves. And lastly, we would like to share with you a new decoding series from 95% Group. They are offering this QR code that gives you a complimentary sample of that. So if you want to take a minute to scan that QR code to get that sample, we'll give you a minute to do that. Our emails are at the bottom if we can be of any help. And once again, we thank you for your time and your patience with some unexpected entertainment. And we will stay on for questions if you should have any. If they're not in the chat box, you could even unmute yourself and ask questions.
Yes, let me unmute the audience and
Okay.
that'll allow folks to do that. If you feel more comfortable putting that in the chat, that will be awesome as well.
And I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe people still need a QR code.
Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I did want to add one thing going back to the structured literacy lesson plan. One of the things that I'd like to emphasize is if you follow a lesson plan like that, you're automatically building in many of these reinforcing steps that we're trying to promote with this multi-component model, not promote, but really advocate for. So I want to stress that. Also, the fall issue 2023 of the International Dyslexia Association's publication Perspectives was all about practice. And one of the features of that articles that I think was particularly helpful was an annotated version of the structured literacy lesson plan to show where all of the practice is built in automatically. And Cheryl was talking about the difference between blocked versus interleaved versus generalized practice. And it's really important to be sure we're incorporating all different kinds of practice within our lessons. So whether it's Sortegories or the structured literacy lesson plan, these are devices, these are tools to help us be sure that we're doing a comprehensive job of laying this literacy foundation for our students.
Great.
Thank you,
Is this
Cheryl.
program, hi, is this program designed for K-2 students, or is it just for intervention and practice for all students who need the practice in phonics and vocabulary?
That's a great question. So it's designed for emergent readers going all the way into the multi-syllable. So it isn't necessarily at a specific grade level, but you can start it, honestly, some of it sound match as early as pre-K. I use it with my 4-year-old granddaughter, but we have older students using it as well. So my 9th graders use previous versions of Sortegories. That, keep in mind, my 9th graders were non-readers. They did not know how to read. So that's not typical 9th graders, but I've used Sortegories for years in my practice, and I've taught elementary, middle, and 9th grade. Questions? I'll go back to that QR code. Any other questions?
I had one for you about activities. Our district has just adopted Sortegories as our intervention for our students. And I am a bit concerned about our kindergartners who don't have any letter sounds. What's going to keep them from being in the bottom of your grid? That if you don't know what A is, and now you're trying to do an analogy. So do teachers assign specific tasks to keep them where they need to be, or is it a wide open choice board?
Right. That's a great question. So right now the teacher will assign it verbally and the student would go to it. So it would require you to kind of look over their shoulder. But as this last slide indicates, we have joined with 95% group, and there's going to be some upgrades coming soon so that the look and feel of that will change differently. So there are some improvements on the roadmap. Feel free to email us individually on that. At customer support. I'll put it in the chat. Customer support at sortegories.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I follow up on that?
Yeah, customer. Yeah.
I just have, I know a lot of us probably are wondering about how do we get this and the price? Is it up now? A lot of things on your website say it'll be launched. I'm confused as to, is this something that can be purchased today to be used? Or is this something that's coming out? The information is a little confusing as a user.
I appreciate that. So it's part of the of that transition from 95% group joining with Sortegories. So I would follow them on social media and feel free to email us into that address that I put in the chat box. But right now, during the transition, new sales have been paused. But we look forward to getting it up and running soon as it's integrated with 95% Group's platform. So keep watching 95% Group social media for updates.
Has the pricing been established?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had
Any other
missed,
additional questions?
I do. I had missed, sorry, I had an important phone call. Was it only the levels A to C right now? And I saw on the website, it was something about pre-K to third grade.
Right. So we have levels A and B are out for current customers. Level C is in development.
Okay. Are you thinking about down the road continuing on with like a D and E for, I do intervention for 5th grade. So I was just wondering if you were thinking about getting to longer passages, more intense morphology and vocab.
Right. We feel free to email us that question. We're still learning what is on the roadmap with 95% group. So that's undetermined information at this time.